She is Kennedy. You can find her at Fox News Podcast. You can find her on the Fox News channel. You can find her on Fox Business. And today you can find her right here on the Will Cain Show. I'm glad to have you back. What's up, Kennedy?
Okay, there's so many things I want to talk about. I'm excited to talk about Michigan. But when you started talking about skinny legs, I was triggered because I've never had skinny legs. I've always had tree trunk legs, and which is great for childbirthing and like you sprinting. But skinny legs are a little better to have for endurance. If you look at marathon runners, they don't have thick legs. Sprinters have thick legs. So I don't think it's the leg worry that you need to focus on.
Well, okay, my friend said to me, he goes, are you winded? Are you huffing and puffing on these long rows? I'm like, no, I don't feel like my cardio system has given out. And you're right. I mean, look at any Kenyan runner and you'll see a guy that is got long, lean muscles as opposed to a sprinter like, say, Ben Johnson. And I know you do triathlons, Kennedy, but, rowing is a little bit like doing a deadlift at lightweight over and over and over. It's kind of the same form as a deadlift. And so you're using your hamstrings, you're using your glutes, and you're using your back. And I just wonder, somewhere in that posterior chain, like over the course of an hour, I feel sometimes, Kennedy, and I think about my diet, and I think about this stupid work schedule that gives me no circadian rhythm when I sleep, and I look at Zen, and I look at all the different things that are potentially taxing my energy system, and something's failing. That's all I know. Something is failing over the long workout.
So it's interesting because my triathlon coach the last couple years has included a lot more strength, and that has helped my endurance, but we all develop our quads way more than our hamstrings. And, for endurance athletes, it can become problematic because that's when you have real wear and tear. And so one of the things when I tore a knee a few years ago, the physical therapist had me do, hamstring exercise. And she was like, just stop with the quads. You got plenty of quad meat. You never have to worry about it again. But you have to focus so much more on your hamstrings and also the lateral muscles. The lateral abductor muscles, which are the ones on the outside. You have to strengthen those a lot in order to keep everything balanced. So I would say, yeah, hamstrings and the lateral glutes, not necessarily the big juicy BBL ones.
I don't know how much time I have left. My 5K is mid-March, so we might be in
fine.
for a ride.
You'll be fine. You have plenty of time. You can do extraordinary things in 2 weeks. You already have the foundation. I don't worry about you.
I'm glad to have you on today here, Kennedy, on the Will Cain Show. Let's start with politics. Let's start with Michigan. So Donald Trump won another resounding victory in a state that neither candidate put much time or effort. Joe Biden won as well, but what everyone's takeaway was the percentage, the number of voters on the Democratic primary that chose non-committed. We saw in Nevada a turnout for none of the above in the primary. When it comes to Biden, the far left is unhappy with D.C.'s policy when it comes to Israel. And I wonder, Kennedy, as someone, I think you are a self-described libertarian. I don't think you've ever wanted to be someone that fits into the traditional political spectrum, choose between the false choice of Republican and Democrat. And I just wonder, this is sizing up, I think, to be a year where whatever it is, no labels, none of the above, plays a big role in 2024.
I think it does. I mean, I think ideas certainly still matter, and the messenger of those ideas matters. Otherwise, if Nikki Haley and Joe Manchin teamed up, they could, if people were just kind of frustrated and wanted none of the above, they would do very well. But I don't think they're enough. I don't think they're what people want. I think people tend to gravitate toward candidates like RFK Jr. because at least he has some answers. At least there appears to be some anti-establishment selflessness there that people are attracted to. Even, it's like, I don't necessarily agree with the guy, but I understand why he's still hanging in there. I also understand why someone like Nikki Haley hasn't made purchase. And it's not just because of Donald Trump. She can run on her own merits, but for a lot of Republicans and for many Republicans, they have become the anti-war party, certainly the anti-endless war party. And if you listen to people like Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and their pleas for billions more for Ukraine, Democrats have become like the pro-war machine party. And I think, that's kind of where Nikki Haley fits in. But we are not being served by a factionalized two-party system. The us or them paradigm is completely broken. It has been for many, many election cycles, and we all know that. Even though Meathead Rob from All in the Family, the super liberal guy, he gets on Twitter every year and goes, "This is the most important election of our lifetime." You can't keep saying that because you're the communist who cried wolf, and no one believes in that anymore. But I talked to Chris Novoselic recently. The bassist from Nirvana has gotten very, very involved in politics, especially local politics, where he lives in Washington State over the last few decades. He is a very well-researched, objective, independent voice. And so, and he pores over a lot of this stuff. And he's been talking about a couple of interesting things for the last few years that resonate with someone like me because my person never wins. I am a limited government, small L libertarian. I'm not a member of the Libertarian Party. I'm an unaffiliated voter, but none of these politicians, they don't want to make government smaller and less intrusive. They want to do the opposite. So he has looked into both proportional representation and ranked choice voting. And I think if you have those two things, if you really could change the system, and they're doing that in places like New York City and Maine, and there are other counties and states across the country who have tried their version of ranked choice voting, and it empowers voters more so they will show up because you put down your first choice, but then you can also put down your second, third, and fourth choice, however many they allot you. So if your first choice doesn't make it, then your second choice gets your vote. So that means that people who are vying for your vote, they have to appeal in a little bit more of a way that creates a coalition and a kinder way, because they want you to vote for them. They don't want to ostracize other people like Bob Costas did the day before yesterday.
Yeah, but Bob Costas is just the latest in a long entry of people for the past 8 years that have maligned people that vote for Trump. By the way, it's Rob Reiner. And
I was going to say Rob Schneider, and I'm like, I know it's not Deuce Bigelow. I know it's not Deuce Bigelow. So,
it's not
yes,
Deuce
Rob
Bigelow.
Reiner.
It's all in it is all in the family. The guitarist for Nirvana, super political, huh? By the way, okay, you spent all those years at MTV, and you've been involved, I would assume, and keep contact with a lot of people in music. We always hear about like the politically active leftist in music. I mean, I guess I don't know if we're going to count Taylor Swift, but we can easily count Green Day. But there are those who I guess would be on the right. First of all, the Ramones, at least some of the Ramones, had some very right-leaning tendencies. Tell me about that. Like, is music rock stardom? Not quite as far as we think on the left?
I think individuals aren't, especially when they start making money. And, they also look at the places they live, the places they have always loved, and they have totally gone to hell in a handbasket. Anyone who has grown up or come of age in Los Angeles, you don't recognize the city anymore. Same with San Francisco. And these were hotbeds of artistry, not just music, but writers and painters, visual arts of every kind. And art tends to be more emotional. And people who make their living selling their art tend to be more emotional beings. With politics, the emotional people are very loud and they're very eager to advertise when someone is on the opposite tracks of their groupthink train. And they will cancel you. And I think that's what a lot of people fear, is if they are outed for being politically agnostic, they are painted as being Proud Boys, as being Hitler Youth, and it's terrifying.
Has that happened for you? I mean, you must have had a lot of relationships, and I don't assume they all, ceased to exist when you were no longer at MTV, but you made a lot of friendships, I'm sure, when you were at MTV. Have you been written off by a lot of people? I mean, Kendi, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me just for the simple affiliation with Fox.
Yes, and Fox more than anything has been a dividing line, and I have lost friendships. And it's funny because some of the people who bailed on me in 2016 when Trump was elected are now kind of coming back around, and they're like, "Oh, I'm watching the news more and more, and what do you think about this candidate? What do you think about that candidate?" And I'm always ready to engage with people, but I'm disappointed that so many people gave into that emotionalism. And people that I thought were my friends outside of our political beliefs, they were so blinded by the need to constantly advertise the appropriate political message in order to appease some beast who is never going to be happy. The left is never going to be satisfied. There's nothing you are going to say or do that will ever be politically correct enough. So just live your own life. And for most people, like, look around. What do you see? For a lot of these places, they have sort of crumbled into dystopia. So do you look at that and go, oh, you know what? Super lefties have been in charge for a long time. So this has been their money and their message in action. What are we left with? You're left with San Francisco. So for a lot of people, they're going, well, maybe the far left really isn't the way we should be voting. And I hope more people are independent. I hope more people are not committed to political parties, but to their self-interests and the ideas that serve their families. Because if everyone is looking out for their self-interest, it will actually be a better world because we share a lot of the same self-interests.
Let's go back to MTV for a minute. People that are younger are going to have a hard time understanding how central that was, not just to music, but to pop culture in general. And you were right there in the middle of it. And like all of those stars must have come through there to some degree, a little bit like a politician comes through Fox. Like, I want your approval. I want to be your friend. First of all, A, was it like that? And then B, which of those relationships have, now I'm not talking about politics at this point now. I'm just talking about, personal life. Which of those relationships proved to be lasting? Like, who are you still close with?
I'm definitely still close with Chris Novoselic. A bunch of people from MTV, Tabitha Soren, Bill Bellamy, Kurt Loder, some of the people that you didn't see on camera. And, it's really great because some of the guys who were PAs, and that means that they were like driving VJs in a van back and forth between the city and the MTV Beach House. They are now either TV executives or running production companies. So it's really cool to see people stay in the industry for a long time. I'm still really close with my mentor, Andy Schoen. He was the one who hired me when I was an intern at K-Rock in Los Angeles. He hired me to be a part-time overnight DJ, and then he got hired by MTV, and he got me an audition to be a VJ, and then convinced Judy McGrath, who was the president at the time, to hire me. So I'm still very close with Andy, and still anytime I have a crossroads in my career or a new project, I always run it by him because he's such a straight shooter. But yes, it was beyond what you can imagine. Like, there were people showing up constantly because we were all in the same studio. It doesn't matter, Yo MTV Raps, my show, Alternative Nation, the live dance show, The Grind with Eric Nies. And there were constantly people coming through that studio. And, it's like one of my clearest memories was one of TLC's very first TV performances. And they were practicing in the women's bathroom, and they were so cute. And like later that day, LL Cool J and Soul Asylum would all come by. And I remember thinking, like, if my 8th grade self, like if I could tell my 8th grade self what's happening right now, she would not believe me. And we had no idea how unique and special it was because you could not foresee things like TikTok and
Yeah.
YouTube and things that have completely changed media and really fractured media. Because at that point, Andy Schoen likes to say it was like opening up your laptop, and the only thing the browser would open up to was MTV. There was literally nothing else, and we did not have social media. We had AOL chat rooms starting in 1994. I remember that because I got in trouble going into one of them because I had just gotten back from snowboard camp in Whistler, British Columbia, and saw a bunch of bears on the hill with their cubs. And I saw a chat room, Bears for Bears. And so I was inside like, I just saw a bunch of black bears in British Columbia. And bears are like a nickname that kind of bigger, hairy gay men give each other. So they weren't there
So
for
you
the
were in that
wildlife.
chat room? They weren't there for the wildlife. That's correct. Yes. Nice introduction, Kenny. What's the biggest rock star story from your time there? Like, I mean, you know what's funny is we always hear the stories from the 70s of wrecking hotel rooms and the bands from the 60s and the 70s and their rock star behavior. What would have been the biggest rock star story of I don't know, Limp Bizkit coming through MTV? I don't mean specifically Limp Bizkit, but whoever it is, your biggest rock star story.
There were a couple of VJs who OD'd on cocaine and one had to be resuscitated and taken to the hospital. The other was shoved in a taxi and went to the ER with arrhythmia. My biggest rock star weekend, I think, happened the weekend before I moved to New York to start my job at MTV. And I had met Trent Reznor at the Roxy. And Louis Largent, who was the music director at K-Rock at the time, said, I dare you to go up to Trent Reznor and sing Head Like a Hole as Ethel Merman. And so I did. I was like, Head like a hole. And I sang it to him, and he paused for a second and put his chin in his hands, and I thought he was disappointed. And he said, I've only ever wanted two things in my life. One was to see a stripper dance to my music, which I've seen several times, and the other was to be serenaded with one of my songs by Ethel Merman. And he said, thank you for making that dream come true. And so we became friends, platonic friends, and Ted Fields from Marshall Fields, who's a billionaire, who owned Interscope Records, which was his new record label, wanted to impress him, was like, hey, Trent, why don't you take some friends to my compound just north of Santa Barbara for the weekend? And I have never seen opulent wealth like this in my life. There must have been 7 individual guest houses in addition to the giant mansion and the polo field. And all the guys from Nine Inch Nails just got hammered and took golf carts out and were just kicking lights and destroying the place. I don't even want to mention what they did to the pool, but that I was like, and with impunity, they weren't worried about a thing. And Ted Fields probably loved telling everyone he knew that Nine Inch Nails went and trashed his $200 million beach compound.
I bet he did love that story. Let's go back for a moment and interweave here some politics. You know, yesterday I had on, I'm going to tie this into what you said about some of your friends and the divisions that started in 2016. And I had a conversation yesterday here on the Will Cain Show with the chairman of No Labels, Joe Cunningham. And one of the things I said to him, I said 2 things that I think is worthy of deeper. I said, I don't see where you fit. And I'm with all due respect, I don't see where you fit, No Labels. Because, Kennedy, like you, probably less obvious, I don't really feel like I actually fit in a clean bipolar system of political A and B choice. But I don't think that makes me unique anymore. I think that the whole political ideological landscape was scrambled probably about 8 to 10 years ago. We're just quit fitting neatly into left and right. And whether or not that's on speech issues or mandated vaccination issues or destroying democracy to save democracy, there's no cohesive, there's no way to make sense of this spectrum from left to right. And I said to him, you simply positioning yourself as bipartisan and moderate doesn't work in a system that's not linear. You need to be original and address America's original ideas. And that's why when you brought up RFK, I said that to him. I said, would you consider RFK? But I don't think that's who they think of themselves as with no labels. And then what I said, Kennedy, was I want to present a platform to you. And then I went about basically describing the platform of Donald Trump in 2016. And it doesn't fit either on that political linear spectrum. It is part of the scrambling. Like by no traditional definition does he represent far right. He only represents far right to the extent that his personality or style is measured over substance. And so I just think that, and I don't expect that to mean it reflects your necessarily unique recipe of politics, Kennedy, or someone that might be libertarian. But what we have to at least acknowledge is it doesn't represent a traditional Republican platform. It doesn't just simply exist at the far right of a linear spectrum. And until we figure out, and maybe ranked choice is the way, that we don't fit on these clean teams with clear ideological issues anymore, I don't think politics fits America.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's, proportional representation is the other side. And that is based on how big your party is in terms of a percentage of the voting public. So, say it's 43% Republican or 28% Democrat, whatever. That's how many seats you have in your legislature. So you would have to have, like, if your Green Party is 4% of the seats in your legislature go to Green Party candidates. Same thing with libertarians. And then because there are some things that libertarians agree with AOC and Bernie Sanders on. Very, very few things, because they, by and large, want to make the government bigger. And they want to take more of your money. And they have no problem trampling on your rights because they don't believe human beings are good or smart or capable. But there are a couple things. So you would find those areas and you would work together on single issues, which is really how it should be. But Republicans and Democrats, who oftentimes aren't that far apart on a lot of things, they other and demonize each other because it's a lot easier to do that than to put your head down and actually get something done. And, I don't have a huge problem when there's a stalemate in Washington, because it means they're not spending too much money. But unfortunately, Republicans are similar to Democrats in that they still love spending money. Like, they don't have a problem with it at all. And I think that it's really difficult to lay out in two political parties what the platform is, because you end up alienating people. And everyone has this sort of all or nothing mentality where it's got to be every single thing I want on this list. It has to check every single box or you are dead to me. And that's where we've gotten, and you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to be a forward-looking country. And, with the far left, they hate this country. We can't even agree that we love this country and we want to make it better. By virtue of saying that, you have outed yourself as a conservative demon. And I did not have that on my bingo card when I was in my 20s.
It's going to sound like advocacy, but I think I'm just accurately describing reality. I think this is another feather in the cap of Donald Trump, is that he's not what you described, that all or nothing thing. He's at his core a deal maker. Hey, I want to ask you this. Is chivalry dead? My Fox and Friends weekend co-host, Rachel Campos Duffy, just came back from the border. She did some great reporting on the NGOs that are housing illegal immigrants. Original stuff from Rachel. But then she posted on Twitter that chivalry was dead. She got on the plane to come back, and she was putting her carry-on luggage, which, by the way, I have no doubt was way too heavy and overpacked. And she's not the tallest person in the world, but she couldn't get it in overhead bin. She said 5 men watched her try to struggle to put that in the overhead bin. I fly every week, Kennedy. I've been confronted with this, and I'd like to think that I do get up. I do. I don't just like to think it. I do get up and help women with that bag. But there's a part of me that's like, hey, if you can't handle your own bag, maybe you've made a mistake in your packing. So is Rachel's experience mean that chivalry is dead?
I don't think it means chivalry is dead. I do think there are a lot of people, a lot of guys who are mansplainers on planes, and they want to prove a point. And you have a very valid point, because I am a minimalist when it comes to packing. I am so good at packing. I can pack for 2 weeks in a carry-on bag and a backpack that fits under the seat, and I'll be fine. I never take more than I can lift. I would never assume that someone should be able to help me lift my stuff. If that were the case, then I would just check the bag and, pay someone, tip someone in order to help me get the bag from A to B. Never assume that someone is going to help you. We have to adopt a survivalist mentality and only take what you can carry. And I think that is critically important. I don't think chivalry is dead. I think that we have kicked the crap out of masculinity. And so a lot of men don't know if they are supposed to hold the door open. I appreciate it. I very much appreciate those traditional norms. And I always think about like the kind of world that my grandparents lived in, where they would get dressed up to travel. And, of course, a man would open a door for a woman and stand up when she's seated, and all of those things. And I hope that the moms and dads out there are raising sons who do that, because that's the golden rule. Do for others as you would want them to do for you. But I'm like you, like when someone's struggling with a bag on a plane, sometimes, and this annoys my children, sometimes I wear navy blue when I fly, so it looks like I'm a flight attendant. And then I try and help them pass out the sanitizing wipes. And I've done that. I've taken the basket and given it to people. And the flight attendant's like, yeah, sure.
I believe you. By the way, speaking of Rachel, by the way, she's height challenged, so not all of this is simply her overpacking. But
That's true. And
Rachel,
those are immutable characteristics that you
yeah,
have no power over.
that's correct. Rachel and Pete and I are legit friends. We will do a show, for example, in South Carolina, and we'll go to the bar on Saturday afternoon between Saturday and Sunday. You as well have a group of people at Fox. And you as well have a group of people at Fox that you're buddies with. And I don't think it's on social media, so I'm not talking outside of school here. You're buddies with like Kat Timpf and Guy Benson. I think maybe Dagan McDowell. What is your crew you run with over there at Fox?
Yeah, so for my 50th birthday, I rented a villa in Greece, and Guy and his husband were there. Dagan was there. Kat, Emily Compagno, Jessica Tarlov is one of my bros. Jimmy Fela, obviously. Jimmy and I have gotten into a lot of trouble in our respective backyards, and I think there are people in my hometown in Pacific Palisades, California, who are probably not looking forward to this 4th of July because we are so loud. But yeah, like Dagan is the kind of person, she'll walk in and be like, put me to work. What do you want me to do? I'm like, can you shuck an oyster? She's like, watch this. She also would help you drain the body in the bathtub until you could get a U-Haul.
Oh,
but I've
a
never
good friend to
worked
have.
a place where I'm so blessed with the friendships that I have. And it's not like that everywhere. That is something that is so unique to Fox. And they're really good at alchemy. They're really good at hiring people. It's like Alexis McAdams and Emily Compagno and I went to Mexico last year on vacation, and we had the best time. We also went to Oktoberfest in Munich the October before. So it's not like that everywhere. And I've always said the good ones have to stick together. So if you have bros at work, like, take care of them, look out for them, talk them up to the boss, make sure that no matter what happens, you have their back and they will have yours. And one time I was at a Jean-Paul Gaultier fashion show. Madonna and I were both in the show, and I went up and talked to her, and we were talking about Sandra Bernhardt had made some really cruel comments about me in the press, and I knew that they had been friends at one point, and she said something to me that resonated with me to this day. There is plenty of room for everyone's talent, especially women. we don't have to tear each other down. And
Hmm.
there's that mentality at Fox. There's plenty of room for everyone's talent. You are not in a competition. You are in a competition with yourself. So that competition is to do better than you did the day before, find your voice, and do something extraordinary with it.
You're articulating something that well, first of all, I don't know that everybody watching can appreciate what you're saying in that. So you're setting that against a backdrop that this business is actually full of people who see success as a zero-sum game, and that if somebody else has a seat, you don't have a seat. And to some extent, they are right. There is an element of reality there that there's only so many seats in prime time. There's only so many seats on this particular show, and we are in some level of competition to it. But I do think there's a divide behind the scenes, behind the people that's internalize that as part of their personality a little bit, and I actually think it's a lot of it is insecurity, but that's how they operate. And then there are others who are, I think, and I can speak for the show I'm involved with as well, who see this as you're in a competition with yourself. Just do your best every day, because what I've realized as well is, look, I've been doing this for a long time. I can angst and I could jockey and I could try. I have no control. I have no control about what executives make decisions behind the scenes. Like, it's going to be what it's going to be. Or if I do have control, I haven't figured out how to exert it yet. So just, it's not a healthy way to live. But I was talking to my son last night, Kennedy, and I was talking about lunch. I didn't realize that they have free lunch. I thought they had to sit with their quote unquote advisory group, but he's like, no, we can sit wherever we want. I'm like, okay. I'm like, who do you sit with? And like, I said, is it like a 1980s movie? Like the cool kids over there at one table and the stoners at the other table, like in, Can't Buy Me Love. And they didn't even know what I was talking about. They're like, what's a stoner? And so here's what I. The Motorhead, yeah, exactly. The Motorheads. They were out in the parking lot. The question is, what is your crew at Fox, Kennedy? Like, I mean, part of you want to say you're the punk rock kids, but then you also just dropped some John Paul Gaultier on me. So I don't know what your crew is at Fox. Which table are you at in the cafeteria?
That's interesting. I mean, I'm really no different than I was in high school. And I was not in the popular group, but I was pretty much friends with everyone. And, when I was running for office my junior year, we had a smoking section at my high school, which is a really funny thought in this day and age that, it's like very few people are 18 when they graduate from high school. So everyone was smoking illegally. They had a smoking section at high school. So I used to go out to the smoking section and pass out cigarettes. And I would write my name in Sharpie on the filter and tell people, hey, when it comes time to vote, I would really appreciate your vote. And, it's like, I didn't judge. I had a great time. I had crushes on unavailable juniors and seniors who were never going to give me the time of day. And, they still probably wouldn't. But it's, same thing here. Like, I high five everybody. But if someone is toxic and they are one of those insecure people, I am not going to waste any of my time and energy on that. Life is short. It's like my energy goes to my kids first and foremost, my sexy teenage boyfriend, and I pour my heart and my creativity.
What did you just say?
My sexy teenage boyfriend.
Follow-up question. Please explain. Sexy teenage boyfriend?
Not really a teenager, but he's younger than I am. So, and he's very sexy.
How much?
He's a 10, I'd say.
No, how much younger?
He's 7 years younger than me.
How much?
7.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the female rule is. The male rule is half plus 7. That's the rough working back of the envelope calculation. Half plus 7 is your range. My mom, after my dad passed, married a man 15 years her younger. 7, you're safe. I don't know what the female back of the envelope math is.
I don't want to have to explain any cultural references to anybody ever. They don't deserve it. So that's where I draw the line.
But it's
and
fun.
I dated some younger dudes, and they're it's not worth the effort. There are plenty of men in their 40s and 50s who are attractive and in good shape. I thank God for narcissism.
All right, last question. We'll end on a serious note. So there was a big contingent in Michigan that was uncommitted, and this is the suspicion is it's the far left over Israel. And the question is, will they vote for Donald Trump? Will they find some other way to vote? Will they stay home? And will that swing an election?
I don't know that it will swing the election. I think it's still going to be pretty tight. I think there are a lot of people who are going to stay home. I don't think Joe Biden is a motivating transformational force the way Donald Trump is. Donald Trump, his most ardent supporters, they're pissed, they're paying attention, and they have been activated. So they certainly will go out and vote. I still think they're going to swap out Joe Biden. There is no way he is able to follow through with this campaign and the election. And I think it's cruel what they're doing to him.
I totally agree. Hey, good luck with that sexy teenage boyfriend. I look forward to hearing more. Yeah. Thanks for being on the Will Cain Show. Thanks, Kennedy.